I need that agenda. Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Travis.
How you doing, Andre?
I'm good. You shaved.
I shaved, yeah. Well, we officially came out of the lockdown yesterday, so.
That was a one-day growth, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I left work and that's brought it up.
The testosterone level must be higher than mine.
Yeah, exactly. So, how's everybody else doing?
All good.
Right, yeah.
Good. Good. Tom?
Hey guys, Robin or Travis, who I believe we do have a couple. There's Fred. Okay. Who else are we waiting for to get started?
I do have a Michelle Dable in the waiting room. I'm not sure if perhaps that's someone else logged in under that name.
I'm not, I don't know.
Could maybe let them in, Robin, and find out.
I'm just double checking our attendance right now.
Oh, yeah. It's Mark.
Okay.
Mark, do you go by another name?
Yes, the joys of sharing computers that are in an enclosed office when I need to.
Okay.
My wife has figured this out and I have not, so clearly it comes up as her name every time.
Anyone else, guys, that we are, I know that Pedro is not available, I don't believe today. I see, where are we here?
I'll, it's Fred here. I'll just state that I do have to run to pick my son up from daycare at about 4:25, 4:30, but I will call in for the drive. Once I'll just have to switch from my computer to my phone.
Thanks, Fred.
I believe we're just waiting on Bhavna and Ramaz.
And thank you, Robin. I noticed earlier you sent out the list of who had confirmed, and I see that one of those people has and one has not. So we'll maybe we should. It's 4:03. We'll just give it one more minute, and if not, we'll get going. Travis, is that good?
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay, thanks.
You don't look like a very well-balanced committee right now. I think Donna and Jamie, you're the only two females on here. I think we got to do a better job of getting more representation.
Well, I think that, having Donna and Jamie, like, we make up for a lot. So
Yeah.
While I appreciate and think that your suggestion about proper gender balance is very important, we're going to hold the fort down for today. But going forward, we want to make sure that we are better balanced for sure.
I don't doubt that.
With Bhavna and Ramaz not here today, I mean, that's part of the issue.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We are balanced. We're just not all here. That's okay. All right. Well, shall we proceed, everyone? And could we call the meeting to order? It's 4:04 p.m. The first item on our agenda is the adoption of minutes, and the minutes were provided. I need someone to move and to second the adoption of those minutes, please, from our last meeting. Thank you, Andre. Andre will move and to second. Thank you, Mark. Any questions, concerns, additions, deletions? And if not, no, all in favor? That is, I see nodding, I see hands. Awesome, that's carried. Thank you. For anyone today, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest to declare that you haven't declared in advance of the meeting, just in case? So seeing none, we'll move on to the adoption of the agenda. Could I have someone to move the approval of today's agenda? Anybody? Thank you, Andre, and someone to second. Jamie, thank you. Any additions or deletions? And if seeing none, be it resolved that the agenda for today's Environmental Sustainability Committee be as presented be approved. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you.
Quick question, Donna. I know
Yes.
that Travis responded to my email, but I lost it for some reason. So if I sent it to everyone about request to planning, but Travis mentioned I should put it at the next meeting. And my only comment or question is, how's the timeline? Is there enough time? And Steve might be able to answer that question with regards to the possibility of having some input in the official plan.
So Steve, before you respond to that, if you don't mind, just for clarity, Andre, I think Travis's note said that today we would discuss having it added to next month's agenda or our next meeting's agenda, right? So I'm not sure about if we can actually discuss it until it's actually on an agenda. Can someone help me with that? Travis, Tom? It's more, would the community committee be amenable to having it added to the agenda? So what can we talk about or not talk about?
Yeah, I would suggest on it, maybe good if we put it on the agenda for the next meeting, or if everyone's in favor of that, put it on the agenda for the next meeting, and then we could come back with the update. I do think broad strokes, Andre, there's time. But we can get the specifics on the timelines and bring them back for the next meeting.
Okay. So with regards to adding that to the next agenda, is there anyone in opposition to that? I don't see anyone. Okay, that's great. So we can move that one forward. Thank you, Andre. All right, we're on to section 5 of our agenda, which is all around our greenhouse gas reduction plans. And under our corporate, the City of Sault Ste. Marie's reduction plans, we have a couple of items here. And the first one is something that Brent Lamming is going to bring forward and help us with some understandings about some things from the Community Services Department. Thank you, Brent.
So, Donna, if you don't mind me interjecting, I just want to set the table for Brent and Steve's presentations.
Perfect.
So from our last meeting, we had, as you all will recall, we had the brainstorming session. There was a number of items that were brought up. Some of the more consistent messaging and the consistent alignment from the team or committee here was, matters of electrification of the current fleet, incentives or recommendations to look at more condensed urban development, recommendations related to active transportation, and also a recommendation to retain a permanent full-time staff to address these issues. So Brent and Steve are going to talk about some of the initiatives that are currently underway. We recognize that we don't have all the solutions in place right now, but we do have some steps underway, and obviously we're looking at building upon those. And then as it pertains to the staff member, we have extended an offer to a staff or to an individual, and we're hoping to have that individual on board either late this month or early July. And there'll be a dedicated sustainability coordinator, which will assist us in not only implementing the GHG reduction plan, but also address a number of other sustainability matters for the corporation. So unless there's any questions on that, I'm going to turn it over to Brent, and then following Brent to Steve. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Donna and Travis, for setting the table. I see a lot of familiar faces here. Hi, Fred. I haven't seen you for quite a while at Algoma. Good to see you again. So thanks for providing us the opportunity. Really excited to be here today and seeing the new format of the committee. Sat on the prior Green Committee and now able to come back here. It gives us good pleasure and giving an update here today. So the main things that we wanted to focus on is the Community Services Department and items that have been completed or in the pipeline, and just to make sure the committee has a fulsome update. So some projects that we recently completed under the transit banner are with respect to some parking lot LED lighting that was completed fully in 2018. The next project that was completed and now sets the table for moving forward is the solar panel project that's done at 111 Huron, otherwise known as the bus barn. And that takes precedent over, it's a 47,000 square foot facility and the bus barn area. So that's really the portion where the buses stay at night. So that represents about 30,000 square feet. And that will be part of a future capital request where we'll be looking to have solar panels installed on the facility and then potentially having that power generated to net meter to the grid, and then getting a better reduction in our costs. And I know Mark's on the call here today. He's working closely with us on this project, and also our electrification of the fleet for transit in general. As well, the full LED lighting was done in the full interior of the garage, bus bay, and administration areas at transit in 2020. As I said, in 2023, we have the plan to go fully solar outside to generate our own power. And starting next year, very excited to announce that we'll be in the process of purchasing our first bus. And so, Robin, if you can go to the next slide, the next slide will speak to that. So as you see here, on March the 29th, we came to council with respect to the plan for the next 5 years to take advantage of ISIP. So it's Investing in Canada infrastructure program where there's 73 cent dollars available for spending. And so we've set a very ambitious goal. Even though we're a small municipality, we try to be a very fast follower to the big municipalities. And we're looking at having 21 units purchased over the next 5 years, starting in 2022 with one electric unit. And that'll also entail charging station. We're looking at a 150 kilowatt charging station, which can charge 2 buses in approximately 3 to 6 hours. And then through this plan here, we're going to be expanding it to 35-foot buses, our community bus fleet, our parabuses, and also electric vans, which would help deliver our on-demand transit pilot in a more efficient fashion. We have that on Sunday evenings right now. We're looking to potentially expand that down the road to Saturday evenings later this year, and allow us to be more nimble to get into more neighborhoods such as the P patch without being able to go off route with right now where we have to follow existing routes with the 40-foot conventional buses. So to put it in perspective of GHG terms, if you take one 40-foot bus off the road in a year, you're reducing 115 tons approximately in GHG, otherwise known as CO2 in 1 year. So that's very exciting. And we're looking at having 21 of the units in total, 10 of those being 35 or 40-foot buses. So you can do the math there to get kind of what you would see in longer term. So we're working closely with the PUC on the charging infrastructure. And I'm not sure, maybe Mark will add something in later on to that aspect, but in the interest of time, maybe I'll move on to the next slide, Robin. So some projects, other projects in the other areas of community services that have been done. Just recently, we had 3 major projects done at the gardens, and one of them being an LED lighting project, which we can see night and day. We took pictures halfway through the project, and you could see a yellow dull cascade through the project as opposed to the new white bright lights, and it really amplifies the space, and we're going to see some huge savings from there long term at the gardens. We've also done it at the senior center. And in progress right now, we have a selected firm, Met Energy, that's helping us with the tender to go out very shortly for the LED lighting at the John Roads. That encompasses both arena bowls, the arena area, sitting area, and then if it stretches far enough, we're looking to also do it with respect to the pool area as well. Our maintenance team is also looking at our facilities in general, is doing one-for-one change out where possible to help get some efficiencies. Robin, next slide. So moving forward, I just see on the agenda a little further on, I have a bit of a presentation to go through on the full heat recovery unit, which was provided in advance of the meeting today, which we'll get into. Maybe I'll save that for now. Some of the items that we've identified as some key low-hanging fruit are the LED lighting at the Rocky DiPietro field, which is in need of change. The NCC, the first and second phases are we need to update that for LED lighting, and then also perimeter lighting for the Roberta Bondar Pavilion could require some attention. Robin, I believe that is the end. So just a quick overview. Didn't want to take too much time because I know we have a big ask on the agenda for the full heat recovery, but wanted to provide some perspective on some items. We're always looking at ways to try to introduce some items in community services, and I'm not sure if you want me to answer any questions or if we want to move on to Steve. So I'm happy to try, and if not, then I'll pass it over to Steve.
Anyone with questions for Brent with regards to his presentation?
Yeah, I've got a quick. Oh, Andre and I both at the same time.
All right, Jamie, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand a little bit of the criteria. Is it payback period? Is it greenhouse gas? Is it available capital? Like, how are you choosing some of these projects?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jamie. A lot of these projects stem from either studies or that we've had over the past and/or the best payback. So yeah, you'll see later on when I talk about the GHGA 6-year payback. That's a pretty good payback on a project. So we usually aim to have that 5-year payback in any project that we do to bring forward to the municipality. And just we take best practices from a lot of other municipalities of community centers to see what they're doing in their facilities as well. So usually it's down two things. One is the payback and also the dollar, how we are able to fund it. So if there's a grants that are available, we look at that right away, and we're in close contact with Mark. He's really good at spotting grants for us as well. And the one asked today, we're looking at stacking the grant application for the ask for today. And the funding for transit, which is unprecedented, is 73-cent dollars. So we have the luxury of having that at our disposal right now all the way through 2026. And as Tom's aware, that's been expanded even further. I'm advised to go forward for another decade. And Tom, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was 10 billion, if my memory serves. Is that the figure you remember?
I think you're right, Brent. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
What's NCC stand for?
Sorry, yeah, I know sometimes we get in trouble for using acronyms, and that's the Northern Community Center. So that's where the soccer, both soccer pitches are. The senior center is right now, and the future home of the Twin Pad expansion, which we're very grateful for to have that announced and approved at Monday's council.
Anyone else? Jamie, did you you had only one question, and anyone else with other questions for Brent? I see Bhavna has joined us. Welcome, Bhavna. Steve Turco, you're up.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. Just a bit of an introduction. My name's Steve Turco. I'm a senior planner with the City of Sault Ste. Marie. I've been with the city for a little over 17 years now. And with the city, I wear a couple of different hats. One being more of a community development initiatives hat. Another focal area that I work on is active transportation. And just before I kind of get into my presentation, I wanted to touch on Andre's comment with respect to the new official plan and kind of applying a climate lens to that official plan. We'd be happy to get into that discussion a little bit more at our at this next meeting. But I could assure you that climate and a number of other key lenses that have been applied to the new official plan. I think it's quite a departure from our previous official plan in terms of thinking about mobility differently, thinking about development and infill in the environment. So I think, you know, Andre, some of that concern will be addressed, but we'd be happy to discuss that more in depth with you and the committee at a future date. So on that note, in a way, I think the planning department in the city of Sault Ste. Marie has been looking at development through a climate lens for a number of years. You know, we also touch upon other key kind of undertones, things like accessibility, equity, economic development, mobility, choice. So there's a lot of kind of undertones to a lot of the different initiatives that we do here at the City of Sault Ste. Marie and some of the things that are led by the planning department. So maybe if we can go to the next slide, Robin. And sorry, if I can ask, is there a way for me to share my screen?
Yes, there is. I'll stop sharing and you should be able to share once I stop.
Okay, so is the presentation on right now, or is it?
No, it's not on, Steve.
Okay, so what I'm going to do something. I'm just going to try to share my screen here. And while we're kind of going through the different themes, I can try to go through some real world City of Sault Ste. Marie examples. So one of the key initiatives that we initiated was our rental housing community improvement plan. And that was an incentive program to really address what we thought was a missing component of the housing market. About five or 7 years ago, most of the local developers were building primarily single-family housing, and we noticed, based on our demographic makeup, there was sort of this missing middle of housing. Housing for seniors, housing for folks that wanted quality rentals, housing for younger people that are just sort of getting into the housing market. So we created a program that was geared towards encouraging smaller scale rentals and really forms of housing that we weren't used to seeing in Sault Ste. Marie, like townhouses, semis, smaller apartment buildings. So, and the way the program works is the proponent would develop or build their property, and then over a series of years, the increase in municipal assessment or the taxes that are a result of development are rebated back to the developer over a period of years. So this is one example on just off of Connaught in the West End. It's a series of townhouses. They're all rental. This one is primarily geared towards seniors. But again, a really good example of a local infill development. So development that's happening within our existing built form and not on the edges of the community. Here is another really good example. Can everyone see? This is the former John Wesley United Church at John and St. George's. Again, another program that utilized a vacant church and repurposed it for a series of apartments. Another example was the former library in the west end of the community. The building was empty. It was vacated. The city sold the property to a local developer that converted the site into apartments. So maybe, Robin, can we go back to the presentation again?
Sure. I just need you to stop sharing your screen.
Okay. Okay, so on cycling initiatives. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen the development of cycling infrastructure throughout the community over the last couple of years. Really, that started with quite a bit of momentum in 2006. And Andre and Donna, you're quite familiar with the original hub trail concept, the John Rosewell hub trail system. That project started in earnest in 2006 and was built incrementally over the last number of years. That was followed up with the city's cycling master plan, and that really meant to build off of the John Rosewell hub trail and develop a series of cycling spokes that would connect from the John Rosewell hub trail system into other parts of the community. Over the last couple of years, since about 2017, we've added or are in the process of adding approximately another 25 kilometers of active transportation infrastructure. And those types of infrastructure are things like cycling lanes, signed cycling routes, as well as a multi-use pass. And some examples of those are, if anyone's been out to the Northern Community Center recently, we recently constructed a path from Cooper Street to Gooley Avenue, which sort of bisects the properties of Cora and the Northern Community Center. Some other spokes include a spoke connecting into the former Etienne Brule School, as well as from St. Mary's College, a spoke route that leads to Strathclair. So if we can go to the next slide, Robin. So one of the big things that I've been involved with over the last number of years is our downtown community improvement plan. This is a strategy that really looks at trying to revitalize the downtown area. And really there's three critical components of our downtown plan. One is to encourage people to reinvest into the downtown Most of the businesses in the downtown are small mom and pop shops that are really just focused on their day-to-day. And for many of them, reinvesting in their building is quite a challenge. And oftentimes it's not really considered part of their day-to-day business activity. But having said that, what those buildings look like from the outside has a real impact in terms of community pride, in terms of what sort of image we're able to put out to the community. So we felt it was really important to encourage people to reinvest in their buildings. The other element is what we call public realm improvements. So we've made a real concerted effort to beautify our streets. Things are projects like Gore Street, Bruce Street, the recently reconstructed Bay Street, with a real emphasis on improving the pedestrian realm, so the space that pedestrians interact with, but also in projects like Bay Street, incorporating a multi-use trail. So really creating more of a complete street approach to Bay Street. And I think that project has been quite transformative. It was pretty much a raceway in our downtown system, and we really changed the character of that street. We narrowed the lanes, we included generous boulevards, we incorporated a strong landscaping program with that. So it really changed the whole image and sort of the whole character of Bay Street. The third component is trying to encourage higher density residential development in the downtown. So again, we use a series of grants and programs to really encourage, again, a different kind of development that we're not typically used to in Sault Ste. Marie, which is sort of that higher density condo or larger apartment complex. So again, I'm just gonna share my screen if I can, Robin. Okay. So there's an example of Queen Street bike lanes. And sorry, this is just backing up to some of our cycling infrastructure. But here's an example of a project, again, in the downtown within the existing built form, essentially a building retrofit program, taking the vacant Plummer hospital site and reconverting it into a condominium development. This was a fairly substantial investment into the downtown. I believe it was around $20 million to repurpose and redevelop this site. And I believe it was 34 higher end residential development or residential units in the downtown. Another example is the building at the corner of Bay and East Street. This one is an apartment complex, but again, really good design with this project, really good presence on the street, really good, the building's not set back, it's not surrounded by parking. It's really, a lot of attention went into the design, the landscaping, how it interacts with the built form. So seeing some really good developments, again, in the downtown, in the existing built form. So we're not seeing development happening at the fringes of the community. And this was an example of a local businesses, reinvesting, indicating that, these businesses want to be downtown. They want to be part of the solution of improving the downtown. This was Savoy's Jewelers, and they did a remarkable job of addressing their facade. And then another project on the other end of downtown. There's a number of them, but these are kind of the two highlights. This was the former Fosha's Cleaners and Stork and Bundle, which was another major investment into the facade of the downtown. So again, projects that really impact the public realm. It's not just what's happening in the building, but affecting how people can perceive the buildings as well. So Another program that we have is encouraging underutilized spaces within buildings in the downtown to repurpose those spaces into apartments. So another example was the Pita Pit building. That building was primarily or formerly used as a dentist office. The ground floor is currently the Pita Pit, but the remainder of the building was recently converted into 5 apartment units. Okay, so Robin, I'm going to stop and I'll let you put the presentation back up. So again, one of the things that we did a number of years ago, and this was really to, we were seeing a lot of larger format developments happening, you know, on Great Northern Road, Second Line, Trunk Road, those kinds of developments. And oftentimes they were using sort of their cookie cutter approach to development, which was large building set back from the road, very little landscaping in the parking area, disconnected from the street, whether it's public transit or the sidewalk. So we wanted to create a document that would help and give some ideas to the development industries in ways to creating a more sustainable development approach. So we developed our sustainable site plan guidelines with the intent to address things like climate change, heat island impact, you know, sustainable stormwater management, but also to try to get an overall better form of development happening as part of these large format retail developments. So I'm going to go through one example. Robin, if you can just let me share the screen again. And again, there's a number of examples, but this was a really good one that's a couple years old, and this was the addition to the Michael's commercial development up on Second Line. What you see here again is the building situated closer to the street. You see that strong connection of the sidewalk connecting into the city sidewalk, an emphasis on good landscaping. So these are the kinds of developments we want to encourage going forward, developments that are located closer to the street, that have, you know, that provide parking, but the parking doesn't dominate the site itself. We want the buildings to be memorable, and we want the sites to be accessible. And again, you know, it's both you know, developing with a climate lens, but also developing with a sense of pride in the community. You know, you know, our downtown, you know, Second Line, Great Northern Road, these are the windows that people from other communities, while they're driving through Sault Ste. Marie, this is their perception of Sault Ste. Marie. So we really want to encourage quality development, but also with those undertones such as climate change. So I'll let you go back to the presentation for the last couple of slides there, Robin. And I think we're near the end of it. Yeah, so this is the one other initiative, and this came about really from the province of Ontario, although we were starting to entertain a number of rezoning applications to this effect. And this again is to really encourage multiple forms of development as of right. If you look at a lot of traditional zoning, and our zoning isn't all that different, zoning tends to segregate different kinds of development and different types of housing types. So in 2010, we've made a series of changes in our zoning bylaw that in certain zone allows multiple forms of housing as of right. In addition to this, in most zones, in most residential zones, we permit second unit dwellings as of right. So these are converted basements or an upstairs loft on a garage, or even a secondary building on the site. As of right, you're able to build a second unit on your property. And again, some of the things that we've looked at, but we're trying to really emphasize in our new official plan, that emphasis on good urban design, things like higher density, infill, strong emphasis on providing mobility choices. So developments where you have the option to either walk or ride your bike to, you don't have to rely solely on a vehicle to access them. Looking at the idea of nodes and corridors. So special areas like sections of the Great Northern Road or our downtown, really encouraging a higher mix of development options. And again, when it comes to residential, looking at the idea of a complete neighborhood. So providing a mix of housing options, as well as potentially some complementing land uses. So people can stay in a neighborhood through all stages of life. And one of the things that we're seeing is, as kids get older, people move out and they find different areas to live in. We really want to encourage that live, work, and play through all stages of life in our neighborhoods in Sault Ste. Marie. So on that note, I'd be happy to take any questions.
I have a couple questions, Steve. The first one is with regards to the cycling master plan and the active transportation master plan. What's the because I mean it's 14 years old now, and is there a plan going forward to combine and update these documents?
Yeah, so I apologize. We kind of glanced over that slide, but there's definitely a move afoot. At our next council meeting, we are going to be requesting our council to move forward on a comprehensive active transportation plan. So a plan that integrates not only cycling, but looks at pedestrian, recreational trails, access to public transit. So essentially all forms of transportation that are not vehicular, but keeping in mind, trying to develop a guide or a policy framework where we kind of move towards a complete streets approach in retrofitting our streets and reconstructing our streets, but also when developers are developing neighborhoods, how we integrate all forms of mobility in all types of development throughout the community. So yes, we are moving forward on that.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to be able to participate in that process, because as you know, with our STAC group, and also we have an active transportation group, informal group meeting. Well, we were meeting every Friday. So we're very invested and very interested in this process. So we're really looking forward to that. My second question on a different topic, when you were talking about the infilling and all your process, I haven't heard any comments on sorry, that's my end here. Any comments on parking? There's a lot. Hang on.
That's okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that we are over-serviced in parking, and parking lots and parking spaces could be potentially used for infilling and housing. And I think that in Sault Ste. Marie, I don't know if it's just me, but parking is way undervalued, and we have way more capacity than is required. So I haven't heard any comments, or is there any consideration to look at why we require so much parking when we develop?
Well, I would agree that we probably have too much parking in a lot of our developments. I disagree that we require so much parking. The parking that our parking standards are in line with most of Ontario jurisdictions. So we're not asking for more because we're acknowledging that we're more of a car-oriented community. Oftentimes, a lot of the developments that occur in Sault Ste. Marie, and the ones probably that you're thinking about, they are more heavily emphasized on providing parking. In fact, a lot of them provide more than what the community or what the city requires. Remember when I was mentioning there's many different hats that we wear, or different lenses that we try to look at things. One of the things that we try to do is look at things from an economic development standpoint. So I think one of the challenges, or one of the solutions, is making Sault Ste. Marie an area that is highly attractive for investment. So people would rather build buildings and apartments and stores rather than building parking lots. So I hear you. I think some of the developments do have too much parking, but at the same time, I think we want to create an environment or sort of a development system where people are more encouraged to actually build buildings which have other values to the community rather than parking. So.
Right. Thank you, Steve. I've done a lot of research on this topic, and I'm looking for the opportunity to provide maybe some background into looking at different ways of doing this, and also best practice going forward. So as a committee member, it's an area I feel pretty strongly about. So I would be more than happy to do some work and provide some, so just so that people look at a global perspective and where we're going with this around the world and best practice. So I believe that's what this committee is about. So anyways, I will work on that end of it. So thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Andre. Anyone else with questions for Steve about what planning is doing under these initiatives to reduce? Seeing none, I don't believe. All right. Thanks, Steve. Very exciting, very exciting. I know Andre and I are really excited right now. I'm sure everybody else is too, to see a comprehensive active transportation plan coming forward. It's wonderful. We're going to move on to the Section 6 green initiatives, and we have an application here that Brent Lamming is going to take us through, relevant to applying for some support for a heat recovery unit for John Rhodes Community Center. Go ahead, Brent.
Great. Thank you, Don. Appreciate it. This grant is a long time coming. It actually was before council in 2018 and supported fully to apply for it. We submitted the grant under the municipal GHG fund program, and it was just submitted. And the day after we submitted it, the program was discontinued. It was changed because there was a bit of a change there. So it's been sitting around for quite some time. It originates back to a study back from IB Story back in 2010 as an action item, one of the key ones to move forward on. And we've been looking for grants to try to fund this project to move forward. So it's a key item. And I just want to kind of quote a couple of things here in talking with staff. We do feel it aligns very nicely with the municipal GHG reduction plan. And if just speaking over to the overall corporate strategic plan, we're trying to be leading, innovative, dynamic, and efficient in Ontario. And the two of the values that stick out particularly are environmental stewardship. We will use resources wisely to maintain and create sustainable city for future generations. And innovative and productivity. We will embrace innovative solutions to improve production and achieve excellence in customer service. So we feel that this grant application fits very nicely under both those pillars of the corporate strategic plan. The total estimated cost of the project, escalating the cost from back when they originally were at $252, we anticipate to be around $300,000. So we're here today. I'm here today to ask on behalf of the corporation under the stream here for an ask of $30,000. Now that would be stacked with respect to a new grant that has come out through the government. It's called the Community Building Retrofit Grant. And of that, we could potentially get $60,000. So we would stack potentially that successful grant, the $60,000 from the government, with the 30,000 CDF fund. And then we would go to our budgeting process and we'd ask the remainder of the $210,000 through the normal capital budgeting process. So we think this would help and it would fit nicely moving forward on this project. This project in general has about a 6-year payback. It actually might be faster than that because rates have gone up over time. So there might even be a quicker payback than that. It also will reduce 1,117,000 kilowatts annually in the project. And essentially what the full heat recovery unit does is it captures energy that's essentially going into the atmosphere right now and repurposing it in a better fashion. And in this case, it'd be to heat our pool as the primary objective. The two secondary potential uses are, it takes it from the refrigeration plant. As you can see, your fridge, and I was explained to me today in granular terms, your coils on the back, your heat is being escaped in that fashion. So we capture that heat using a full heat recovery unit. And the second is your condensers on the roof of the John Rhodes Community Center. You have fans that let that heat escape into the air. So the full heat recovery unit allows that capturing of both those sources of energy and then repurposing them, and you can use them in different fashions. In this case, the pool is the primary option, but we can also use it for other things, such as heating in-floor heating for change rooms, potentially for people that use the change rooms, domestic hot water and flooding for heating, preheat use, bleacher heating to keep people warm within the facility, and also for air heating in the lobby and vestibule. So it's not only the pool that we could use it for, we can use it in a number of fashions. Right now, the city heats the pool mainly with natural gas. So talking with our building manager today, he thinks that that'll actually also help in that capacity as well for us to avoid having natural gas consumption. He could potentially, he's estimating that potentially half of our natural gas consumption, which would also be an added benefit. There's some questions posed, and very good questions by Pedro in advance of this. So I have a couple answers, a few of the questions here, if I may. And we had a recent building condition assessment done in 2020, which updates a lot of the information by Morrison Hirschfield. And it's a 25-year capital plan for all our city facilities. And so through that plan, it identified some of the things. He mentioned insulation. Not only was insulation identified through that building condition assessment, windows, doors, sliders, boilers, air handling units, and joint sealant, to name a few, were also recommended within that building condition assessment. And we plan that every single year. And resulting for example, we're putting $91,000 towards air handling units to address those alone this year. And then the LED lighting project, which I already kind of mentioned before, we're addressing just this year. Some other terms that were mentioned as well as how was the GHG calculated? So it's 206 per year over the life of the project, 6,592. So basically we're taking our historical utilization and if we implement the projects, what would be obtained basis the base solution. The other question was how long the lifespan from the full heat recovery unit. The lifespan is between 20 to 25 years. So not only over the payback period would it be utilized for another approximately 20 years beyond that life. Another key component that was mentioned within the grant application is that a typical community center emits enough energy to supply 40 residential homes. So there's enough energy there for us to look at, to capture, to help utilize in the facility itself. And also some environmental benefits that were highlighted was the reduction of the CO2 into the atmosphere and wastewater usage as well. And I think I would like Mark to add to this because he's worked closely with a number of projects on this, and he was involved back in part of this study along with Emily Cormier, who had worked with us previously on this. So Mark, maybe there's some something you could speak to, maybe provide some extra comfort to the committee from your involvement in the project and from the GHG perspective. So if you may, and I hate to put you on the spot, but if you could maybe add something, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure, I can add. I have been all for this for a long time now. I think we've been talking about this for quite a while now to get this done. I think things like when we look at whether it's a GHG perspective or a conservation perspective, when we look at facilities like this, the more that we can utilize or reutilize energy within the building and reduce its overall consumption is a great benefit. Buildings like these are always identified in municipalities and communities as high energy users. The multi-use type of arenas, facilities, pools, and then meeting rooms and all that other stuff. So when you start to see facilities like this in target of where we can make impactful changes, these are the type of facilities. So that's why I've always been for this. I think it's a great idea. You know, it's a start. And then there's obviously I was involved in a lot of the lighting audits and stuff like that to get those changed also. But I think it's a very impactful project in my view. I think it's a great idea. But yeah, if there was any more questions, I can definitely help if there's anything else.
Anyone with, I just want to, Travis and Tom, help me or just clarify if I'm saying this wrong. So this application request is asking for $30,000 to come from our community development fund under our Green Initiatives program. And the process we're going through tonight is for this committee to approve or not the request that's been asked for by Brent. I have that right, yes?
You have it right in that this committee would recommend to City Council, and then Council will make the final approval. And that's a similar process, just so the committee knows. We have other funds that we have recommendations. So Economic Development Fund requests go to the EDC board, who then recommend it to Council. Tourism Development Fund go to the Tourism board. They recommend to Council, and Green Initiatives to this committee. Social Equity, the Social Equity Committee. So it's a new practice that we've just put in place to bring recommendations to Council for final approval as people apply for these different funding programs.
Okay. So anyone with questions for Brent or Mark, if we could do that. Go ahead, Eric.
I have a question or comment, I guess. I think that there's limited resources. So the question is like, is this the sort of the best bang for the buck? And that was kind of what was the hardest to determine from reading the proposal. It was hard to tell whether investing in this reuse of energy system versus putting that 300,000 into finishing all of the other retrofits or other, you know, it was just hard to tell whether this was sort of the best use of the 30,000 here and maybe the 300,000 to kind of get the best bang for the buck right away.
Did you want me to start, Donna, from my perspective? Okay. Eric, good question. From my perspective here, we've done a lot from all the arenas and all the community center facilities, a lot of the projects already, and the LED lighting was the low-hanging fruit, and I identified a few through the earlier presentation. On this project alone, we're potentially looking at saving longer term $40,000 to $50,000 a year going forward. So if the cost, as I say, the payback 5-6 years, potentially it's a great return on the investment. As Mark said, it was identified as an action item back in 2010. We're now in 2021. We still haven't done it, and we should have done it many years ago. So it aligns exactly with what this committee was set up. It was also identified from the prior Green Committee, so as a priority project. So I would fully recommend it, and I'm not sure if anyone else, Mark or someone else wants to add. Travis, from your perspective with the pot of money here.
Yeah, just to build upon that, it was one of the first recommendations that came out of the GHG reduction report as well. So, you know, just to reiterate Brent's comment, you know, it is low-hanging fruit and something that we could move forward with at this point.
Yeah, I think I'll just tune in now. When I'm going over Appendix 3.1 of our greenhouse gas reduction report, to echo Eric's point of view, there's a number of different projects that have lower payback periods, perhaps for that are less capitally intensive. So like for instance, in this particular one, like it says a 7-year payback. I know you're talking 5-6. I know some things have been updated that maybe we haven't seen. There's also been a number of projects that have been completed in that appendix that maybe we're not aware of. I know there's a living document and it has to be into version 2 now, right? But I would suspect that maybe you're even underestimating the value of this in particular, if you're going to save half of the natural gas consumed for pool heating, and the kilowatt hours was estimated off of 2008, 2009 data. So like I'd even want to see like an updated cost benefit table for this project that shows that it's actually even a better payback period than what we're talking about now, which I suspect there is. I like what you said around the pillars in the corporate plan for stewardship and innovative solutions. Certainly waste heat recovery has never been cheap, but it's always been a really great project to have for energy efficiency, for stewardship, for innovation, all those things. And just as a community member, not only just a committee member, but as like a hockey parent sitting in a cold bleacher, there's nothing worse than that. So, you know, this type of stuff would be great for me on a personal level. But absolutely, I think that I think we can strengthen this application even more. So Eric, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say there, because like when we're looking at that appendix, certainly there's lots of payback that are in the 2 to 3 year time frame. So understanding this in a holistic view as the committee responsible for this, like how do we do that? We only have 50,000 if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, thanks. That gets across my point better than I did. And I think Jamie's right. I think this project probably is, you know, probably has an even better payback than it's presented as. It's kind of hard from reading the proposal as it's written to sort of to be sold on it right away.
I guess maybe I'd ask Travis or somebody to comment on the other projects that, like, how do we deal with this fund and the allocation of these funds in particular when we're looking at our mandate as a committee to drive greenhouse gas reductions holistically?
Yeah, so this is always a challenge. You know, we've got limited budget and a number of projects. You know, as you mentioned, there are a few that have you know, quicker payback period and what have you. You know, when we look at the projects that we have, I'm looking at, just for everybody's reference, Appendix 3.1 of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan. It is one of the projects that has the highest reduction in GHG emissions out of the projects that we have identified. You know, we're looking at 206 tons equivalent, CO2 equivalent with the reduction. You know, and I think when you get up to that level, there's not a lot of projects that are within that range. You know, so I think from that perspective, I think it makes a lot of sense. It is one of those things where, because we have rolling intakes, you know, it's kind of on a first come, first served basis. We've had a few other community projects approach us, but none of which resulted in a reduction in CO2 or GHG emissions. You know, they were more kind of sustainability type projects where it was looking at planting native species in certain areas. So this would be the first project that's come across our desk that actually results in a GHG reduction. And I'm not sure how many more of those types of projects we'll see, you know, this year or potentially in future years from the community itself. So I would definitely support this project, and, you know, as we go forward, continue to look for other projects that can have this magnitude of impact or greater.
Yeah, and I'd even say it probably is more than the 206 tons a year, just based on probably consumption being more over the past 11 years or so, based on the age of the infrastructure and whatnot. And then also the comment about the natural gas consumption. If you're driving that down by half, that's something that's not currently calculated in the engineering report, IB story report, I think. So that'd be a nice addition and a good communications, I think, going forward. And so just a follow up from that discussion I had, how certain are we, I guess, if we go ahead and we commit these funds, that the other capital will be there to implement the project?
Who wants to take that?
Tom?
Tom?
How did I get named? Yeah, I would say, so ultimately the decision does go to council. So it's tough to say how certain we are. With that said, if the committee supports it and if Brent is successful in the application to get the additional funds and the GHG reductions, I would say this would be a priority project for council to look at. So that's probably as far as I could go on that.
I'm not sure, Jamie, were you asking how certain the Federation of Canadian Municipalities contribution would be? Was that your question, or?
No, I was more so concerned with the 210 that would come from the normal capital through the city. Yeah.
Okay.
And when I can also offer when we do our capital ranking projects, certainly the criteria includes, is there outside funding for this project, the benefits of the project. So all that gets factored into the ranking of those projects. So that would help this project rise up in that list.
So Tom, just as a point of clarification, if the project, if we didn't receive that capital funding, then I think it's a $30,000 request Brent's asking for, that would flow back to this fund itself.
That's right. That money would stay with the fund if it's not used for this project.
Mm-hmm.
And just as an aside, Tom and I both ranked the projects from the area, so we would make sure it would get ranked fairly well.
Okay.
Fred here.
Hi, Fred.
I just had a quick comment, and I'm pretty sure you're not regulated under any carbon pricing system right now, federally or provincially. But in my world, 200 tons of GHGs next year will be worth $10,000, and as the cost of carbon is $50 a ton next year. So if you were to be regulated, there's an additional savings that you would have.
Yeah, and that would be passed on through the any sort of gas consumption on the bill, right? Right, Fred?
That's correct. Yes. So if you're unregulated, then yes, that would be a cost pass through.
Yeah, so we can
you're
add
right.
that
That's a very
to
good
the
point.
business case. Yeah.
Your 43,000 or whatever it was can be 53,000, and it just shortens your payback period.
Yeah.
So just a point of reference to that, with some of these programs, I know when in the past, especially with the ISO programs, when you did sign up for the incentives, you signed those credits over, and they just retired them. So there was you couldn't claim them if you claimed the incentive. So we should look into that. I mean, I've read over the documents, but I haven't gotten to that much detail of them yet, but we should just be aware before we're counting stuff like that, because these incentive programs are usually funded by claiming those credits and using them on their own for themselves.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think a valid point, and I think it's just, it adds to the conversation about reassessing how that value was arrived at, and I think the carbon pricing that was in place back in 2018, whenever the assessment was done, wasn't in place and wasn't anticipated. So it's probably not factored in that you would have had to pay that cost pass through.
Thanks, Fred. So where are we going here, team? What are we thinking? Are we wanting to send this back to the staff for some additional information? Are we feeling comfortable about moving ahead with some, where would you like to see this go?
Just one other quick question. This is over 50%, I think, of the funds available this year, if I remember correctly. So are we expecting that there will be any other applications? Do we know?
Travis or Tom?
We haven't had any outreach yet for applications that would qualify. That being said, I think what the structure of the fund is that if we don't utilize the full 50 grand on an annual basis, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, then it goes into tree planting fund, as I understand it.
Yes, that's right.
So, yeah, anyways, I think probably a point of conversation, we don't have to address it now, but, this one was a bit, obviously the first application, and it is coming from a municipal source, but in the future, as we get applications, would it be helpful if we did a bit of analysis on them and then provided a report with staff's recommendation and like a PowerPoint kind of breakdown of the asks? Or
I'm not. I was just going to say, sorry, Jamie. I'm not sure that we can. I think that we still have a couple. That's a good question, Travis. I'm not sure that, considering the time tonight, that we have time to like delve into that. I think I'm looking for, what's the decision or what's the direction that this group wants to give related to this, and then we're going to do Peter's presentation, and that. But we'll come back to that next time because it's important. I'm looking for someone to say. I know Eric and James.
Why don't we just put it to a vote for the committee?
How do you feel about that?
Can I add one more thing too?
Absolutely.
Address some of the other questions that have been asked about updating. So with the application for the grants that through the FCM, there will have to be an updated study or an updated values and numbers and things like that. So there will be, when we were discussing, and I know one of the questions was it's an outdated study. There will be updated numbers, and they will have to bring the numbers up to, today to apply, and that is one of the conditions of the grant is, the study or the information provided to them have to be up to date. They would never accept 10-year-old information for the application.
Thanks, Mark. So if we're going to proceed to getting some direction here in terms of who's comfortable with moving this forward, I cannot see Andre or Bhavna or Fred. So if I could ask those of you who I can see, if you could raise your hand, if you are comfortable with moving forward, if you prefer to do something differently at this point. Could I just see where everybody's living on this right now? Who's comfortable to move this forward? 1, 2, 3, 4. Bhavna? I don't know. Bhavna says good. Okay. I believe that means we have enough to proceed. Fred, how are you feeling? Yes, no?
Yeah, I'm supportive of the project.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And I think that was a really great discussion. And I think, we've got a lot to move forward with in terms of how we strengthen that application. Super. Okay.
Donna, I was just going to note that Bhavna wrote in the chat that she was good.
I saw that. I'm sorry. I read it and I didn't say it out loud. Thank you. Thanks, Tom.
Donna,
Okay.
can I ask a question? Just I have to leave to attend another meeting, so I just like to thank everyone for their time and their support here. And just as a point of clarification for process, does that just mean a resolution will come from the board, and then we'll include that with an ask of council? Maybe do I pass it over to you, Tom? I see you shaking your head. Yeah.
Yes, correct, Brent. I think that's the process there.
Okay.
So do I need a mover and a seconder to make this formal? Yes. I'm looking, Robin's saying, do we need a mover and a seconder? Is that what you just said, Tom? I don't know. I like the consensus thing, but I know we. So could someone move, please, that we recommend that this project be supportive? Anybody? Okay, Mark, thank you. And someone to second. Thank you, Jamie. All right. And we had an all in favor. We did it in a little bit of reverse order, but that's great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brent, for getting that clarified for us. And we're going to move on now to the item. I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but I know that Peter Bruins is here from the Innovation Center. And he's got something that he'd like to chat with us about. The I don't know the name of it. Sorry. Go ahead, Peter. Where are you? There he is.
Hi. Hi, everybody. I think I know half of you, but I am the head of the Innovation Center. I wanted to share my screen so I don't have to read it. I don't have a slide deck per se. Share. Okay. The federal government of Canada has just issued a funding request with 5 themes, and theme 3 is the one I'm focused on here. The Sault Ste. Marie Innovation Center, along with Algoma University, City of Guelph, City of Sault Ste. Marie, once Tom gives me a letter of support, and the University of Guelph are going to put in a joint application to attack this theme 3 for funding, which is a 5-year program, $6 million total. And the whole idea behind this is looking at a municipal level greenhouse gas emissions platform that the federal government believes necessary and as a contribution to intellectual property around monitoring greenhouse gas reduction. So our plan that we're putting in, and by the way, we're not here to request funding. There is not going to be a funding request for this. This is a research project which will have significant potential upsides for the city. But the idea here is to monitor greenhouse gases from the ground up, which is reductions in combustion sources, which includes increased population of EVs, conversion to solar energy of houses, the project you just discussed and recommended for approval, additional tree planting, that sort of a thing. And to measure those, and you've already done a good inventory, I think Emily put that together, and then to do a top-down analysis of greenhouse gas emissions, which is atmospheric. And that's where we're planning to do most of the work, because the ground level stuff is really just a very quick application of our geomatics infrastructure we already have for the city. It's a matter of tracking where energy is going and where it's used, and we already know all of that. But the top down is unknown, and there's some research that has to happen. So our plan would be to create a grid over the entire city of Sault Ste. Marie and install between 75 and 100 sensors, which are going to be monitoring fine particulate matter, PM 2.5, if any of you are aware of those terms. Fine particulate matter is a direct result of combustion and correlates directly to greenhouse gas emissions. It's very difficult to measure atmospherically how emissions have moved up from an urban center up into the atmosphere because of weather, the way it disperses, and you're not just measuring CO2, you're measuring multiple other gases. So fine particulate matter, there's been a lot of research done to correlate that to greenhouse gas emissions. So our plan would then be to put this network above the city, recruit 3 scientists. Pedro Antunes probably be one of the Algoma University liaison, and then we would recruit in a climate scientist and an environmental scientist, probably a postdoc. Their job would be to create the mathematical algorithms for interpreting the PM 2.5 data that we collect from these 100 sensors over the city. And then we would correlate that on top of our geomatics platform that we have, that the city has, and that we are operating on behalf of the city and the PUC. Map that, create mathematical algorithms that will calculate the total greenhouse gas emissions from all sources, whether they're directly identified as a chimney from X boiler, or whether they're macro from a set of behaviors, a subdivision, hot weather, cold weather, however they're driven. And the mathematical models will normalize for things like wind, humidity, precipitation events, which can distort readings from the sensor network. And by doing that, we can correlate between energy inputs at the ground and atmospheric conditions and create a software platform that can provide a macro tool for any urban center in the world to simply put a network of sensors up which are not that expensive, $500 to $700 each. Take that data, install the software platform and the geomatics platforms, similar to what we have in Sault Ste. Marie, and then they can monitor their atmospheric greenhouse gas levels. And then at the same time, as they're implementing projects, multiple projects and scenarios, that they can actually track the atmospheric reduction of greenhouse gases and then correlate that to the input. Why it's timely for the Sioux is Algoma Steel, as an industrial partner, is about to go through a tree planting exercise. I believe the city is looking at additional tree plantings. Algoma Steel has also raised all that capital, and they're going to be, one of the projects is to put an electric arc furnace in, which will cut 70% of their natural gas combustions down. And then Sault Ste. Marie is pretty nominal in terms of EV adoption, but that is going to change, and it'll change at an accelerating pace. So then this thing would track all of that. It would track residential efficiency improvements under the federal government's, well, you guys don't need to look at my calendar, but it would track the federal government's new program on residential energy improvement. So all of that would show in this macro network over a long period of time. The network also, because it's collecting PM 2.5 data, which additionally correlates to health outcomes and wellness of population bases, and there's lots of literature on that, that it also becomes a basis for health research and wellness research, that Sault Ste. Marie then becomes a source for advancing health research of air pollution. Another reason why the Sioux is a perfect location, we don't have neighboring polluters that are distorting the umbrella of air above our city, which means that we can monitor our own reductions. So we normalize the city's emissions story, and it doesn't get contaminated by an adjacent city story. And so we can create a baseline that other cities can then factor in when they're looking at their own data, because they have to factor in pollution that migrates in. Also, greenhouse gas emissions migrate in from other jurisdictions. And so the whole idea then would be this letter of intention goes in by next June 10th. The project, if approved, this letter of intent gets approved, goes for a detailed project development, which will involve a lot more work from Pedro, myself, our geomatics team, and University of Guelph to define the project in greater detail. And then if the funding's approved, which we think if we get to that next level, the cash is approved, we would begin the project January 1st of next year, and it would run for 5.5 years. The assets that we have in the Sioux are this environmental committee. We have a lot of inputs into the community which can coordinate and communicate a lot of the greenhouse gas activities and projects. This project becomes a research project with an outcome of intellectual property, which we will then market globally. But all the projects that a city will have to undertake, whether they're city funded, provincially funded, or federally funded, are all going to have to work towards achieving the 2050 emission standards. And I think Sault Ste. Marie, because of the advanced geomatics, there's no other city that can pursue this kind of a research project other than Sault Ste. Marie. In terms of software development, we have all the tools necessary in the city to put all the artificial intelligence and all the other interpretive software to make this thing a reality. And we have access to, through Algoma University, to all the research assets in Canada. So we have to work to identify them. So I think this is a huge win for the city. It leverages us onto a global stage because if we pull this off correctly, this will be a technology that will be applicable to every city in the world that is committed to monitoring greenhouse gas emissions at the atmospheric level. So I think that's an early overview of this. It'll get much more defined as we work through the next round, assuming we get through this. But I wanted this committee to be aware because I think there's going to be lots of opportunity to discuss how we shape this monitoring, what are the criteria we should consider, and even if we want to focus, let's say, I talked to Tom a little bit about this, let's say we wanted to do a target major mitigation project in, say, Jamestown, where we overplant more mature trees to get a rapid response on urban cooling, greenhouse gas mitigation, PM 2.5 absorption, then work with Algoma Steel to put significant trees on their boundaries to Jamestown. We kill multiple birds with sort of one stone, kind of, in that we can improve the residential attractiveness of Jamestown. We can get data. That will be the area of the city with the highest PM 2.5 loading, simply because of adjacent industrial settings. And we could really benefit the citizens there, I think. So that's one subset of this. In the application, I have put capital in for about $400,000 to $500,000, which would be us targeting a greenhouse gas reduction project that we think can have the fastest impact that this umbrella of data collection can take in and calculate the impact of from an atmospheric point of view. So it becomes an opportunity for this group to look at, well, where's the biggest bang for the buck on a project that could mitigate the maximum amount of greenhouse gases as a data input into this model. So at that, I just wanted to leave it there for now because it's early stages. But if anybody has questions, just fire away.
Anybody with questions for Peter?
Yeah, Peter, just a quick question, and sorry to the committee. I know we've gone over our allotted time here, so I'll make it quick. You said that PM 2.5 was correlated with GHGs, but what GHG is it correlated with?
Well, it correlates to mostly combustion-related greenhouse gases, like CO2 for sure, but also other combustion gases that derive from VOCs. So any of those sorts of things, emissions from automotive often emits fine aluminum particulate, PM 1.0. So it would correlate to that. It would not correlate to methane emissions and some rogue emissions like anesthetic gas emissions from a hospital. So it wouldn't pick that up, but the majority will be CO2 and combustion related byproducts.
I can speak to the question a little bit as well. It's Brett here. PM 2.5 is generally a result of byproducts of combustion, which include NOx and SOx. So by reducing, the combustion of fossil fuels of any kind, you're going to automatically reduce the emissions of nitrogen oxides and sulfur dioxides. And so in doing so, you'll reduce PM 2.5. That's the sort of general principle. And that's part of the reason why the province of Ontario generally doesn't regulate PM 2.5. They regulate the individual contaminants because their PM 2.5 is made up of multiple different contaminants. And I just sort of gave you two examples of them.
Yeah, and there's already research done that has the mathematical correlations between PM 2.5 and greenhouse gases. So we would be building on the research work that correlates the two. So that research has been done in Europe and in China and in other locations.
Does that answer your question, Jamie?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I just wanted to be sure we're talking about air pollutants separately than we were talking about greenhouse gas emissions, because they are two different things,
Yeah.
right? So,
And we are talking about when we're monitoring, it'll be for products of combustion and all the NOx and SOx.
yeah.
However, the mathematics correlate that directly to greenhouse gases, which is why the federal government has issued this as one of the themes for the Climate Action and Awareness Fund.
Great. Thanks so much, Peter.
Thanks, Peter. Could I ask you to stop sharing your screen just so that
Yeah.
I think we can all see each other? And is there
Okay.
anyone else? Thank you, Peter. That
How do did I do it?
is Robin sharing or is Peter sharing? I'm not sure. Can I?
I don't know how to unshare. Oh, there it is. Stop share. Gotcha.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Does anyone else have questions for Peter? And I think that the point behind this was that he's looking for our support in blessing, I guess, if you will, in making this application. And is there anybody with any concerns about that, or shall we, give him our strong support? And Tom, go ahead.
Quick comment or question. I think it's a great idea. I just my first question that comes up, I guess, is how it compares to some of the greenhouse gas monitoring satellites that are coming online. These are all coming online like now and soon. And so is this going to give us better data than that, or?
Well, the one particular satellite system you might be referring to is the methane monitoring satellites. They wouldn't correlate to the PM 2.5, or they can pick up atmospheric densities of particulate and things like that and create sort of general maps, but they can't correlate it to a specific urban environment. So what we're trying to do is create the correlation of the greenhouse gas emissions to the data of that urban center. On methane emissions, it would be the most efficient way. One of the things we do need to track is methane as part of this, like short-term climate forcers, which methane is one. If that satellite data is available, great, then we just tap into that and pull that into this study. And into the reporting. If it isn't, there's methane cameras that you can get that can help us monitor that. But I don't think it'll be an issue of tracking things like methane because those will be managed under different sort of regulations than I think what the urban reduction would be. The PM 2.5 wouldn't necessarily track the reduction of methane, even though methane will emit to the air combined with other VOCs and create particulate matter. So there is some correlation. So yes, there are lots of technologies coming online, but I don't think they'll be able to offset the accuracy of what we're hoping to create here.
How's that sound to you, Eric?
Oh, good. I have like a million questions, but we don't have time. So
well, we're also going to have scientists help us out here too. So there'll be an awful lot of science-based questions, which will be all part of the project team. So there's lots of learning to happen through this project.
So this is just generally for us to say this sounds great, and we support what you're doing, and how do we feel about that? Is everybody feeling good about supporting where Peter's going with this? And I believe that would result in Tom writing a letter on our behalf or on the city's behalf in supporting that application. Am I right about that, Tom?
Right, that would be great, Donna. If the committee felt comfortable with the recommendation, then certainly gives comfort for us to provide a letter of support.
Okay. Anyone in objection to that? If not, I see no one. Thank you very much. That was very interesting, Peter. Thank you very much for bringing this forward to us for our information. And we wish you the best on that application. I know we're a little bit running late here. I'm just wondering, Travis and Tom, the next item on the agenda is the staff update. Is there anything in particular that we haven't yet covered?
No, we've covered everything, Donna. I think we can wrap up here.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to take a minute because I know I'm very interested in this, and I know that I'm sure that everyone else is. And we have Fred on our team here, and I wanted to see if Fred, just in a very brief moment of time, with the tremendous and exciting announcement that Algoma Steel made last week. Fred, what do you want us to know about that? What's really important, and what should we do with that going forward? And I know that you don't have all the details yet, but what do you want to share with us sort of in a couple of moments?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of details that I know about and I can't share, but basically Algoma has merged with Legatos, and we're going to be going public in the fall. And that process has generated some funds that we're looking at different alternatives for using. And one of the things that we're looking at is the transformation of our processes from coke oven blast furnace oxygen furnace steelmaking processes to electric arc furnace steelmaking. And that would be immensely transformative to our process, to our site. We're still evaluating it. The new board will have to have a detailed review and approval of any kind of project proceeding moving forward. So it's still not something that we've committed to. We're evaluating other alternatives as well. But the project itself has immense benefits from my perspective as the environmental manager. It's immense environmental benefits. It's over a 3 million ton a year greenhouse gas reduction, which is probably the largest reduction at a single point in Canada, save shutting down a coal power plant. It has other additional environmental benefits from reducing emissions from air contaminant emissions from some of the existing processes. But it's, like I said, it's still not at the approved stage. We're still looking at this and working through the process. And it'll be a transformation over a period of time. It's not going to be like we flick a switch and we would be able to become solely electric arc furnace steelmakers. But it does give us a long-term security, both as a large employer in the area, good paying jobs, and stable financial outlook. So I guess that's my high level summary of where we're at right now. I think we can safely say stay tuned for more updates. It's not the only thing we're looking at. There's lots of other different things we're evaluating as alternatives for use of some of the proceeds of this merger deal and funds that became available. I'd be happy to try to answer any initial questions that anybody has. I know that we are over time, but I'm fine with that.
Anybody got, I mean, it's a very exciting announcement, and I'm sure we all look forward to hearing more about it and actually seeing what's going to happen. Anybody sort of initially right now have more questions? It's great to have Fred at the table because, he'll be here for us to ask questions about, but anyone right now with anything before we wrap up?
Yeah. Hey, Fred, does this mean that you can commit to being net zero by 2050?
Well, as chair of the Environment Committee for the Canadian Steel Producers Association, I was directly involved in our sector establishing the target of net zero by 2050. So yeah, that is absolutely our one of our objectives in this process.
That'll be a great communications opportunity in partnership with the city.
Absolutely. Did you have any other questions, Jamie? No. Thanks. Anyone else want to take advantage of Fred at this point? Okay. Seeing none. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your time today. I know we went a little bit over, but I hope that you feel that we had a good meeting. I appreciate your, and I'm sure Travis and Tom and Brent and Steve, et cetera, we appreciate your input. Thanks, Mark, for helping out. a little extra special on the heat recovery unit. And what do we know about our next meeting, Travis, Tom, or when are we looking at?
We haven't established a timing for the next meeting. I know we're headed into, normally summer season, people have become occupied. I know we're still, a lot of people still aren't traveling, but we could set out a doodle poll following this meeting. Usually we do, normally what we do with the other committees is we establish a consistent date, like third Tuesday of every month.
Right.
You know, and maybe we can get on a schedule like that. But we'll send out a doodle poll shortly.
Yeah, maybe we could check on that particular, like once the second, third, whatever it is of each month. And hopefully we could sneak in another meeting before summer happens. Or maybe this gang is so excited about the work we're doing, they're going to say, we don't care about summer. Let's just keep plowing through. All right. Well, we'll see what happens when we doodle poll. Okay. Could I have someone to move adjournment of this meeting? Looking around. Andre, and thank you. And Mark will second that. Be it resolved that this committee now adjourn. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday and the rest of your week. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.